challenge.
Peter Gabriel had finally quit the band in 1975. Losing Gabriel meant Genesis had lost a great writer, performer, and charismatic frontman.
In many ways, the Gabriel era Genesis split up at just the right time. They went out on a high with The Lamb. I think everyone now looks on that as a real classic album. Obviously, punk rock was about to rear its spiky head, and bands like Genesis would suddenly become rather unfashionable. Certainly, Peter Gabriel had said he saw that punk rock was coming. He didn't want to be a stadium band. He said, I see these bands that they were like the Emerson, Lake and Palmer's, the Jethro Tulls, as a bit of a Titanic, and I don't want to go down with that ship. So he cast adrift at probably just about the right time. And obviously Genesis, in showing that they could survive without him, it was a good result for both parties.
The music world waited to see who would be brought in as a replacement. The critics began to circle. Without Gabriel's unique contribution, it seemed the band was finished. To the cynics, it was the end of an era, and so it was. But it was only the opening chapter in the Genesis story.
We knew he had an awful lot of problems to overcome in terms of finding a singer and all that, and also the fact that the whole image of the band was totally wrapped up in Peter Gabriel.
I think everyone is as important as everyone else. It's the combination of people. And in fact, when Peter left, I think, there was a kind of feeling against him. Suddenly it was like, well, what was he doing? And that was so wrong, because he was very important.
I believe they did try auditioning other people, quite fruitlessly. It was a difficult role to fulfil. And the fact that Peter had such an identifiable voice and his stage theatrics was so inimitable, if you like, it was going to be a hard choice as to who would be appointed to the job.
It was kind of unsaid, but there was always kind of feeling that, you know, well, maybe Phil doesn't want to do it. And I think in the end he went, look guys, I wouldn't mind having a go at this. And they were like, well, you know, maybe we'll kind of see. And eventually they kind of did it after mulling a lot of different things over. Then it was kind of like, yeah, actually, that's all right.
We spent the first 3 months trying out singers. And then we suddenly realised that every time he sang the song to show them how to do it, they would do it, and he sounded better than them.
So I said, well, let me have a go.
Phil Collins stepped out from behind the drum kit. His superb vocal contributions and exuberant stage persona added a new and completely unexpected extra dimension, which took the band in new and exciting directions.
He'd already done backing vocals during the Gabriel era. He'd already sung on Steve Hackett's solo album at the time. Hackett of all of them, was the man who pushed Collins forward and said, I think Phil should do it. I think he can do it. Let's give him a try. Initially, both Rutherford and Banks were a bit, nah, he's not right, he's a drummer. Nah, he's not what we're looking for.
You can only say consider yourself part of the family, really. Do you know what I mean? And he's got a fucking amazingly commercial voice. You know, so what the fuck? Has to get out, stand there, and stand in front of a microphone and make loads of money.
For many fans, this proved to be a second golden era of Genesis. 5 great albums produced from 1976 to 1980 provided the building blocks which saw Genesis develop from progressive icons to genuine superstars. The first public introduction to the new Genesis came in 1976 with the launch of Trick of the Tail, produced by David Henschel. Production-wise, the album shone, crisp, light, and with a clarity missing from earlier albums. Tony Henschel could be justifiably proud of his production credit. The album carried many of the hallmarks of the classic Genesis sound. Dance on a Volcano was a vibrant, fresh-sounding opener. Always a strong feature in Genesis, Tony Banks's keyboards are much more to the fore in Trick of the Tail. Banks also made a very strong mark as a writer. His inspired use of melody and intelligent lyrics marked him out as a composer approaching the peak of his form.
This album came out in February 1976, and it was a very successful album. It's to the band's credit that they got stuck in so soon after Peter Gabriel's departure. This came out in early '76, and it wasn't a case that they sat around on their backsides thinking, oh, what the hell are we going to do? Their answer to the problem was to get absolutely stuck in, and the result was a Trick of the Tail.
We had all agreed to stay together, that we were sort of determined to show people that it was a band, and it wasn't Pete's backing band, you know. So we got together in Acton, Churchfield Road in Acton, and got a rehearsal studio and started writing, and we wrote what was to become a Trick of the Tail, which at that time was our best album.
Genesis had always been perceived really as a vehicle for Peter Gabriel's lyrical flights of fantasy and his concepts, which in truth was never ever the case. Everybody had collaborated on lyrics in Genesis with Peter Gabriel. They were confident they had the music. And in fact, by the time the rest of the world knew that Genesis no longer featured Peter Gabriel, the band had written pretty much all of A Trick of the Tail. So they were feeling fairly confident about it.
It was different, but it was still them. Yeah, I was amazed because I love the album. It's one of my favourite albums. I think it was an incredible work, you know, for them to come out with that under the pressure they must have been in. I still listen to it now and it still blows me away like it did, you know, when I was a kid. You know, wonderful piece of work, and to pull that off without Gabriel in the situation they're in, you know, it just shows that, you know, the kind of talent and the resilience of the band.
The departure in sound for A Trick of the Tail came really because the band were more confident in the music they were writing. They knew how to write good soundtrack material, which is what they'd always written for Peter Gabriel. Now they had a chance to push that music to the foreground a bit, which they did. And they felt much less constrained. They also, for the first time, went out and got themselves a proper producer. And he really pushed the sound of the band. He divided it up, saw what was good about it, and got it down in the studio properly.
Even after we recorded the album, we decided to look for singers because we thought, well, he can't play drums and sing, and he'll never leave drumming. And then he said, well, what about I go up singing and get a drummer in? So we said, oh, all right. And we were quite surprised, and it worked.
They got no horns and they got no tail. They don't really know of our existence. Am I wrong to believe in the city of gold that lies in the distance, crying wet as they led away to a cage? Beasts that can talk read the sign. Creatures they pushed and they prodded his frame and questioned his story again.
In Trick of the Tail, the right hand is almost playing the steady rhythmic part, the kind of to set the tempo, and then the left hand is doing the complicated syncopated bit where it's moving up and down the scale crossing over against the beat, so kind of a. So the left hand is moving much more than a left hand would normally move.
Trick of the Tail is an important track in as much as the band named an album after it, and it's got a typically quirky Genesis type plot of a strange creature coming in the midst of people and them not quite being able to cope with it.
There's a lot of fantasy imagery involved, which is reflected on the album cover. It's not a song that should be taken too seriously, really.
They got no horns, they got no tails, they don't really know of our existence. Am I really wrong to believe in the city of gold that lies in the distance? Quite dark. I mean, God knows what that's about.
They had written it and not decided who they wanted as a singer. Ideas were passed around. Mick Rogers from Manfred Mann's Earth Band, he was one who came for an audition. Jeff Roden was another.
It was one of the smoothest in the public eye and ear, you know, in terms of that. It was a very smooth transition. I mean, obviously there would be nerves and there would probably a lot of debating, can he do it, you know. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's very difficult to think how Genesis could have continued and gone on to be as successful as they were if Collins hadn't taken the reins. No matter what, you know, you think of his solo material, no matter how you perceive him in the fact that Genesis seemed to become a mainstream MOR band and then almost even a vehicle for Collins' ego itself. You know, at that point in time, we're talking about somebody who was integral to Genesis then, not just as a drummer, but as a singer and lyricist too.
They got rid of a lot of the pretensions and pretensions of Peter Gabriel, honed down what they wanted to do, took on board the fact that Steve Hackett felt they'd gone too overblown anyway, and made slightly shorter songs which still had an impact and still had a lot of musical complexity about them. And people took to it.
Trick of the Tail's a brilliant album. It's one of my favourite Genesis albums of all time. It stands up there with all of the stuff that Gabriel did, as does the next one, Wind and Wuthering. You know, there wasn't a particularly huge stylistic change in sound. They just sort of developed, carried on kind of doing what they were doing. In fact, any Genesis fan that was bricking it when Gabriel left would have probably been mightily reassured in 1976 when they got that album in their hands.
The overall feel of the album is wistful and melancholic. The arrangements are delicate and intricate. There is a palpable sense of mourning for the loss of youth and innocence, which gives the album a romantic charm of its own. The sleeve by the Hypnosis partnership is the perfect complement to the music. There is an Edwardian feel to the illustrations, which mirrors the sense that the music spiritually belongs to an earlier, more innocent England.
If we can help you, we will. As soon as you're tired and ill, with your consent we can experiment for our skill. Well, thanks to our kindness and skill,
Trick of the Tail had proved that Genesis had the ability to produce a great album without Peter Gabriel. It was now time to demonstrate that the quality of the album was no mere accident. Wind and Wuthering, released in 1977, was to prove a worthy successor to Trick of the Tail.
In December '76, Genesis came out with Wind and Wuthering, which was not quite as successful as its predecessor, and a lot of people tend to overlook it and think, oh, it's nowhere near as good as Trick of the Tail. For my money, it's a better album. It marked a new venue for their recording. They'd relocated to Relight Studios in Holland for the recording, and for me, the sound of that recording room must have really suited the band, because here was a fatter, almost overnight, a much bigger, fatter sound to Genesis.
I must find a new home. Raising homes that used to give me shelter. They're all as one to me now. But I would search everywhere just to hear.
There are some very good moments on Wind and Wuthering. One for The Vine, 11th of Mile, which I think is the best song on the album, the one which opens it, Afterglow. They're all really good songs, but somehow it didn't flow as well. There was an unease about the record, and to me the unease was defined by Your Own Special Way, which is written by Mike Rutherford and completely and overtly a love song. And somehow that crystallized the fact that Genesis were at another crossroads and things were going to have to go in one of two directions. They were either going to have to go in a much more challenging way, which I would call much more progressive, but not progressive in the retro sense, and perhaps take on a more of a King Crimson vibe, or much more into the mainstream. Wind and Wuthering was the album which defined you have two directions to go, and therefore I think it's slightly an unsatisfying album, albeit full of satisfying moments.
Wind and Wuthering, I think, was their first big Phase 2 Genesis album. They'd done the other two, they'd begun to find themselves, search where they were going, and I think this one they began to really find their feet, and they really began to stretch themselves, know what they were doing, get commercial success in all the international areas, and begin to really make a mark.
Yeah, Wind and Wuthering's a great record again. I mean, it's sort of like, you know, that batch of albums from Nursery Crime onwards. Nursery Crime, Foxtrot, Selling England by the Pound, Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, Trick of the Tail, Wind and Wuthering. 6 absolutely brilliant albums, 6 of the best prog rock albums ever, not just great Genesis albums. You know, and that's a kind of like defining moment of that second phase of the Genesis sound.
In many respects, the recording of the album had progressed smoothly, but inside the camp were the first signs that all was not well. Guitarist Steve Hackett was increasingly frustrated over how little of his own material was making it onto the albums.
Wind and Wuthering was one of the kind of, in a way, almost overlooked albums by Genesis. It came out at an odd time for them. They still had Steve Hackett as part of the team, and he was contributing odd little bits here and there, like little solo pieces, which I think the others felt weren't always relevant. They didn't actually want to have solo guitar pieces within the Genesis framework, so that was something that they had to overcome. That's the problem within Genesis, I suppose, is you have all these powerful people, these creative talents, and they all want to express themselves, whether it's Phil, Tony, Peter or Mike, and yet they are expected to, you know, suborn themselves. They're supposed to create for the greater good.
Genesis were now firmly established as a band which could produce new material that stood comparison with anything that had gone before. It was now time to prove that the new Genesis could also do justice to the older Genesis material. The result was to be Seconds Out, a double live album recorded during 1977.
I think it was a very cleverly orchestrated business plan to show that, reassure the fans, if you like, that Phil Collins could do it justice, and hang on, this is just another incarnation of Genesis. There are a lot of fans out there that were anxious to see if Phil really could cut it as a frontman taken over from Peter Gabriel, and he did remarkably well.
Well, Collins didn't do the Gabriel stuff better than Gabriel, but on Seconds Out, he's way above adequate.
And to my mind, the fact is that this was a moment that marked the time when Phil Collins became the frontman of Genesis, because he'd been doing it for a few years by then, but now on a live album, taking on the old stuff and the new stuff, this is when he made the transition and said, it's now the band I front. I'm no longer doing the job Peter Gabriel did, I'm doing my job.
You must remember that Phil didn't get into all the theatrics or the dressing up, etc., etc. So then it was just down to, can you sing this song? Can you put it over? Can you make something of it? The answer was yes, and he did a really good job. He managed to get his head around it. He managed to do the interpretation really well. It shows what a great singer he was, because actually the Peter Gabriel stuff was tough to sing. Gabriel was a really unique and good singer, and doing that stuff is very hard.
And actually, while they were mixing and the tracks for Seconds Out, Steve Hackett made the decision to leave the band. So once again, a crucial time. Once again, they release an album in the midst of turmoil and upset.
I think there's a bit of friction between Hackett and Banks. I think there always has been. And I remember Steve Hackett telling me in an interview that he only found out that Genesis were playing at Milton Keynes, the Six of the Best show for Peter Gabriel, when I guess they wouldn't play it under the Genesis name, but they played it as, because Gabriel was going to sing with them again, and they didn't want it to be viewed in name terms as he's rejoining Genesis or anything. But Hackett says that he only found out about that because his dad told him. So he drove up there and just turned up and was like, someone in the organisation had sort of made it clear that don't let. And the way he kind of portrayed that to me was that it was due to friction between him and Tony Banks.
The way it happened was extraordinary because we were doing Seconds Out at the time, mixing Seconds Out, and I was driving into London, and I saw him on the street, and I said, "Do you want a lift?" Because we were supposed to be mixing the album, we're supposed to all go into the studio. He said, "No, it's all right. I'll call you later." So I got there, and Tony and Mike said, "Have you heard?" So I said, "What?" He said, "Steve's left." So I said, "I just saw him." He didn't say anything. Anyway, he called up later and said, "Listen, I thought it was best to tell you on the phone, but I'm going to leave." So I said, "Oh, okay. All right," and put the phone down. And it was strange. I mean, the way it happened. I mean, if Steve's watching this, he might feel strange the way I'm talking about it, but it was, by the time these things do happen, that it is better that you get it over and done with. It wasn't like we were quite excited to be a three-piece instead of a four-piece. It's just the way it happened, and we just decided to carry on.
If they had let you make this album or these albums, you could still conceivably be with the band?
It's indeed possible. I mean, it is possible, yeah. But basically, on a personal level, they couldn't accept it. Phil was, literally doing albums and gigs with another band. So I found it totally hypocritical of them to try and restrain me in that way. We had a lot of meetings and discussions and arguments, and basically, the whole thing became so cramped and so tedious. But at another time that there was only one course that I could follow. After you've done one album yourself, which you're very pleased with and has sold well, and you've created an audience for yourself, there's no way that you're suddenly going to take a step back. As they say in rock and roll, I don't have to take a shit from anybody anymore.
Seconds Out was to prove a brilliant swan song for Steve Hackett, a lasting testament to a gifted musician and writer. With the band now reduced to just 3 writers and performers, it was logical that the quality of the group's output might begin to decline. Michael Rutherford, however, took the opposite view.
5 people, as we were when we started, developing as sort of personalities, expanding as writers and musicians, need more room. And we could barely contain 5, and now then we were 4 for a while, and they kind of developed, and you could barely contain that. And now there's 3 of us, and there's a lot more room.
I just think some of the older tracks from Genesis, not all of them, but some of the older tracks from Genesis are just on a different musical level to me. It's like they were really crafted carefully and with love and care. And some of the later music sounds to me that it's just almost written to be a pop song. And I'm sure if Phil, Mike and Tony were sitting there, they would argue this point, saying, well, it took us a lot of effort to do these tracks, and I'm sure it did. But there's something magical about what they did. When Steve Hackett was in the band as well, or at the early years with Gabriel, there's something magical about the combination of 5 geniuses, really, all doing their thing. I would imagine there was a lot of animosity and all the rest of it, not that any of them would ever admit to it, but I'm sure there was. And there was something they did at that time that for me was never really repeated quite to the same standard. I think when Steve Hackett left, for me, something left the music. I think he added, there was an element that he added that for me made it a little bit more interesting to listen to musically.
When the next Genesis album appeared, the quality of both the writing and playing had improved once again. On Then There Were Three, the arrangements were simpler, but the melody lines were as powerful as ever. Deep in the Motherlode was a great example of the subtle shift away from the more intricate arrangements of earlier albums and the first move towards the pop sensibilities which would characterize Genesis in the next decade.
Well, I like to think that I inspired the title of the next Genesis album, which was And Then There Were Three, because that was the headline in Melody Maker when I reported that Steve Hackett had left the band and now Genesis were Phil Collins, Tony Banks and Mike Rutherford, the original reprobates from 1970, reduced in number.
Then There Were Three is possibly one of the weakest albums, but I think it's more difficult for the three of them to sort of conjure up a similar sound than it was 3 from 4 as it was 4 from 5.
I think what was happening with There Were Three with tracks like Follow You, Follow Me, they actually started to develop a slightly different audience. An audience that wouldn't have listened to Genesis records before.
Their audience of the early 70s were into prog rock, long hair, caftans, sitting there with joss sticks, smoking joints, had grown up, got married, had kids, had coffee tables. Now Genesis were catering for them. And I think you could understand it to some extent because they wondered how they'd survive in a situation where their old fans were no longer buying records. So they appealed to where their old fans were, and in doing so also brought a lot of other people on board who never wanted to listen to Genesis before, but suddenly heard tracks like Follow You, Follow Me from the Pigeon EP and thought, oh, this is quite pleasant, I might buy one of their records. So that's what And Then There Were Three represents to me. It was the end of Genesis, the prog rock band, and the beginning of Genesis, the mainstream band.
After more than 10 years, 12 albums, the loss of Steve Hackett and Peter Gabriel, what is it that makes the fans loyal to Genesis? And do those fans have any criticisms to make?
For 18 months, I've been sitting at home listening to their records, thinking, I wonder what they're like. And it's them 200 feet away from me, which is quite something.
Depends whether you like Genesis because of the music or because of the image of Genesis. If you just like the image and you like to look good as a Genesis fan, then you might not like other types of music because you think the image isn't good enough.
It's certainly not an image band. I said, if they were probably one of the most least fashionable bands around at the moment.
What about your mates? I get a lot of slagging off because of Genesis. They're not a Vogue band to like.
Live audiences are always pretty young, actually, especially at the front, compared to, say, like a record buying audience. It's interesting, yes. I mean, you look at some of the faces in the front few rows and you think, 10 years ago, they were on tricycles virtually. I mean, not that bad, but I mean, yeah, almost, when we were starting off. Yet they know the old stuff, which I always find, you've obviously got into an album recently and then gone back sort of to our old material. It's very encouraging. And there are the elder element, but I reckon there are people who just sort of, I think it happens in rock music, there are people who just grow up and drift off it, they just lose interest.
There's two different things, Genesis now and Genesis then. I mean, in the old days, you used to try to do the same on stage as you did on the album. Be all kind of mysterious and inaccessible. But now it's just more entertainment, you know, Phil Collins with his funny little stories and all this kind of thing.
Possibly Phil Collins realises that Genesis don't really communicate with their audience as a lot of other bands do on stage. So he sort of tries to get everybody involved, being like one of the boys, if you like. I'm just the same as you, and I'm up on this stage, and this is the way you'd behave if you were up here.
After the first 5 or 6 years, they were really original and innovative and all this kind of thing. And nowadays, they seem to be, well, they're losing inspiration.
They're
things like
beginning
this.
to have a recognised style.
They stagnate, yeah.
I think people either love it or hate it. I think that's the feeling I've generally got. I mean, I loved it. I thought it was again, it was like a fresh new beginning. The songs were, by and large, shorter. It was a different production. It was a very bright production. I guess technology was moving on as well, and it changed. You know, it was a change, a shift in the band's direction, definitely. And I still thought it was a Genesis album, but I actually loved it. You know, some beautiful songs on there.
I mean, basically, the band is a band of composers, and if a song feels good, 3 minutes long, then we'll leave it at 3 minutes. You know, because there are some things you just can't stretch out for the sake of it. You know, it just feels right at that length.
From first to last, there's not a weak track on it, but then again, there are no real career highlights that you would look back on and say, this was Genesis' greatest moment.
Certainly the business heads, Tony Smith, their manager, hit and run their record label and publishing company, were probably very happy to hear after sort of 6 albums, 7 albums, an album that was much more aimed at the commercial jugular.
I think Deep in the Motherlode it sounds very much like the sound of Then There Were Three. It's a very bright, keyboard-driven, riff-driven song. It's very much storytelling, which they kind of did seem to do more and more of. I mean, it is based round a riff, down, 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 and it's maybe a little bit more minimalistic than some of the stuff they've done before. But it's all based around a riff, really, yeah.
Clearly, it's a rock shuffle. You know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, da 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 da. You know, and that track is actually quite a hard, tough track. The guitars are mixed a little bit more up.
And you're rolling the days right on into the night. At the head of the line. Oh, it's way out of sight.
I could imagine them saying, well, you know, let's mix up the guitars, and maybe if Steve Hackett had still been in the band, he would have said, no, let's not do it like that, let's make it more interesting. These are quite basic, stripped down rock guitars. And I think they probably, because they didn't have the other members of the band to contradict them musically or say, no, I don't like that, let's try something else, they probably thought, this sounds good, let's leave it, and this is the direction they wanted to go in.
You've got Mike Rutherford left to do the guitars there, but I thought he did a great job.
He'd never been a lead guitarist, and suddenly he had to be one. He rose to that challenge admirably, actually.
I think Mike Rutherford's use of bass pedals was great, and in particular in Duke's End, you know, where he really beefs it up. It gives it that extra kick, extra bottom end.
They were very similar to the bass pedals of an organ, which enabled an organist to play the 2 manuals of an organ with both hands, but also to be able to play the bass parts with his feet.
There were only 3 of them, so this was kind of crucial.
A couple of simple presses would have great effect. There's sort of awesome power and make everything sound very big rock and very kind of. You could make a 3-piece band sound like a couple of bass guitarists and a couple of guitarists playing heavy power chords at the bottom end.
I think Mike is. he's a very good writer, you know, he's a very good lyricist, Mike. He writes, he has good melodies, good lyrical ideas, you know. And I guess, I mean, he also has a very distinctive guitar sound as well that became kind of evident through, in the later years, through a lot of the Mike and the Mechanics stuff and some of the Genesis stuff, and there was elements of similarity in both from his style. So he's got a very distinctive style, but I think for me, his writing abilities, his lyric writing and melodic sense of melody, I think, was very important.
It was kind of, there was that and Many Too Many that were kind of, I guess the first time you would imagine that the female audience would get interested, you know, love songs.
Follow You, Follow Me is actually one of my all-time favourite songs. It's kind of a backdrop for my upbringing. My parents used to listen to Then There Were Three quite a lot.
In Follow You, Follow Me, we've got a wonderful, simple yet very catchy melody in the chorus. If I could just demonstrate. Just 4 notes, but very simple. But again, in G major, very nice open key for the guitar, and very, very simple. But then later on in the chorus, the left hand moves to the relative minor, to E minor, so we get that really sad sound. So.
It's hard to say why it works musically. I mean, I'm surprised that it's so beloved by Genesis fans. I think that must have been their most commercial song to date.
If you ask our ardent fans what they think of it, they'll say, oh, it's the group single. You know, it's obviously a commercial single, but I mean, to me, that's one of the hippest things we've ever done. You know, and I mean, the way it was written was because it was out of improvisation. It was a blow, basically. And it just sort of honed itself into this sort of verse, chorus, verse, chorus, chorus, verse. You know. And the attitude behind it was totally, you know, on the level.
In fact, the producer, David Henschel, didn't even want it on the album. He thought it was so weak that that it was so un-Genesis, it shouldn't be on a Genesis album.
To the punters, I suppose, they sort of see it as their band trying to get a hit single, you know, and we've never really needed that. I mean, in America you need that, but also in America you're more likely to have a hit single with something that's, you know, related to what you do anyway. So.
And Then There Were Three was a change. It was like a shift again. It kind of brought it into the songs were essentially shorter. It was more direct, kind of more intense, whereas it was more relaxed and progressive before. I think there was a gradual changeover when Peter Gabriel left and then Steve Hackett left. It kind of merged. It was moving somewhere else, and then There Were Three was like the light switch went, and the style changed in a sense that the songs were shorter. They were more commercial, I guess, in a way, more of a commercial album.
Phil Collins had to step up to the microphone and was essentially taking the reins of the band, you know, by doing that. And I think it was a new broom sweeps clean in a sense, you know. Maybe if they'd got another singer in or another musician who was more prog rock, that got somebody else to join the band who was going to sing, they might have stayed a lot more prog rock. But you know, as we later discovered with Phil's solo work, he was quite into Tamla Motown and, you know, pop songs. So why not? You know, he's now, you know, the other guys weren't saying, no, we can't do that. You know, they were obviously encouraging him.
When I first joined the band, it was I was kind of viewed as class clown, you know, because I mean, I was a kind of scapegoat in a way, which is fine, because I mean, like, drummer's role, which is what I was at the time, the drummer's role is very defining. It's like a goalkeeper, you know. I mean, it's like he's there to really present the vibe, you know. You give the band the energy with the playing on the drums and the sort of humorous and the sort of personality vibe, then the band will sort of, you know, bounce off it.
I feel that Once and Then There Were Three had come out, Genesis had completely changed. Still very capable musicians. Actually, that's underrating them, excellent musicians. But a band who seemed comfortable making mainstream mature pop for mainstream mature pop buyers. And by the time Duke came out in 1980, Birth of a New Decade, Genesis were quite happily and comfortably ensconced in this area where the likes of Billy Joel existed. Not knocking them, because they're very talented, these people, but it was a different type of Genesis. It was a Genesis appealing to an audience who had grown up and didn't want the early 70s Genesis, or had never really got into them in the first place.
On tour, in general, I'd much prefer to be playing, now we've done the 18,000 or the 20,000 seaters and we've proved we can do it to ourselves and to other people. It'd be nice to go back into playing small clubs or small theatres. This is what I would like to do, isn't it? And so I can see that maybe myself would go back, still be playing in clubs in front of people in maybe 10 years' time, but obviously not doing this kind of thing.
At that time, they scaled it down to some theatres. Maybe they were trying to get more of an intimate feel from the concerts, bringing it back to how it began. You know, and by no means were these small shows, but I believe that they did scale it down. Maybe they were sort of reinventing the feeling that they had, you know, when they could see the audience in front of them and get the feeling of the intimacy of what a smaller show gives you as a band.
Yeah, I mean, each gig is basically very different. You know, I mean, you're still dealing with a different set of people, and the people, whatever they give back to you, you know, makes you sort of go 100%. I mean, I find it very hard to do anything less than better than I did the night before, anyway. Just because to me it's like an ongoing thing, you know. I mean, you're just trying to do it a little bit better every night. I mean, we haven't actually got to the situation now yet that we're on automatic pilot on stage.
Music from our album called Duke.
Duke is a very transitional album, but it is moving towards what you might call the 80s era Genesis. It came after the band had nearly broken up, caused by Phil Collins' marriage collapse. He actually moved to Canada to try and save his marriage. In fact, Phil Collins' marriage collapsed anyway. So he comes back 2 months later and says, well, it's all over, so let's carry on. There was definitely a new feeling about them. There was a new sense of bonding. They sat in Phil's bedroom and jammed constantly. And at the end of the day, they'd go back, listen to the tapes, see what they liked, and that's where Behind the Lines and Turn It On Again and Duchess all came from jams like that. And they were able then to fill out the sound, and it's the beginning of the new 80s Genesis sound.
It's a really defining moment in electronic use within rock music.
Throughout the 80s, there's a huge influx in electronic drum sounds and percussion. People were experimenting with all sorts of electronic sounds.
The use of the drum machine on Duchess is interesting because the band actually jammed it up in rehearsal, and to actually be playing to a drum machine in that way was perhaps indicative of Genesis looking for new ways of working.
I think what's important here is that they don't overuse it. They use it in collaboration with live drums on this particular track. So it works really well.
The synth parts are great, really great. I mean, I must admit, I was never that big a fan of Tony Banks, but in retrospect, he's some excellent parts, and that's combined with the electronic drum beats as well. It gives the whole thing a very hypnotic electronica type of feel, which was quite revolutionary. I mean, you hear it now a lot, of course, but there weren't any loops at the time. So it was an early foray into electronica to very good effect, I believe.
That's the brand new single from Genesis from the album Duke, a track called Duchess. How are you viewing the prospect of the Liverpool audience for 2 nights?
There's towns you know are going to be good and kind of rely on.
There are supposed to be several hundred forged tickets in circulation. I mean,
Yeah,
what are your thoughts on
according
that?
to the fans, the guys outside said 7,000 or 8,000. I think you said 700 or 800.
I think 7,000 is a bit
It'll be a couple of
toppy.
million by the time we get down to the gig.
Does that
On the
cause a
air.
problem, presumably, before the gig then? I mean, if the tickets are having to be checked that thoroughly before the kids are coming in, then it must
makes
slow...
the process of people coming in very slow, which means we go on later. Which means there's more risk of us being drunk. Sorry.
This is an afternoon radio show.
That's right.
Turn It On Again, what a great track. I think that's probably my favourite Genesis track.
Turn It On Again has an almost rhythm and blues type edge in the old-fashioned sense of the term, which made it particularly palatable to American audiences who are now beginning to wake up to what they've been missing in Genesis.
I'll never forget the first time I heard it on American radio. I just couldn't believe it. I knew that it was Genesis because of Collins' voice, but I couldn't quite accept it because it's magnificent.
It also, typically with anything involving Phil Collins, has a very rhythmic feel, and in fact it's in 13/4 time, which possibly makes it unique among, if not Genesis music, then hit singles.
Crashes in with all this driving bass notes. You know, it's what creates the tension is this pedal note, continual pedal note from the bass and the guitar, just staying on the one note, the drums building it up.
It's quite hard to follow where the rhythm drops along with the vocal. They almost seem to clash, but it's perfect.
It's the classic rock track, simple as that.
By now they're starting to take in more musical influences. Some of the influences have come at them from people like Chester Thompson and Daryl Stuermer, who were American musicians who'd come in, and although they weren't contributing on record, they were touring with the band, and obviously there was an impact going down. And suddenly there's a new sort of swing to their music, which in itself breeds its own confidence, and you can hear it right from the beginning of the album.
I think Duke's End is a really successful track for the reason that it's a classic prog rock song.
It's a farewell fanfare. It's saying, that's it folks, you know, we've given our best, we believe this is a great album.
Genesis always liked to end albums on a high, and with Duke, which had a certain semi-concept running through it, Duke's Travel and Duke's End was almost like the full stop at the end of the album, the buffers at which the train finished.
It still shows, even at this stage, although it was getting more scarce, that they had that magic ingredient to really rock out, to really go for it.
It's very hard with new material, trying to introduce new material to an audience, because people basically come to a concert to have a confirmation, you know, and they feel safe with what they're hearing, and they like to hear the songs they know, because then they can sing along with them, you know. And if you give them too much new material, luckily our album's been doing very, very well, so all our fans that are coming to see the gigs know it. You have to reach some kind of climax.
Press my skin, white liquid turns sour within, turn fast, turn
always been kind of unaffected by trends and fashions in music, really. And we've always really made the music we want to make.
The thing about Genesis is that every other band that comes after them and around them owes a massive amount to Genesis.
One of the very front runners of that whole prog rock movement.
Two lovers taken through a strange journey in surreal worlds and then coming back to the reality of planet Earth to witness the apocalypse. And it's a very odd thing, to say the least.
If you ever saw him live, you'd always be sitting there on the edge of your seat thinking, is something going to go wrong here? And it always sailed through perfectly.
When I was at school, I had bought the album Selling England by the Pound, Trick of the Tail, and the album Genesis with Mama and That's All, and these tracks on it. So I knew a fair bit about Genesis, and it was fun discovering the rest of it, to be honest. There was a lot of good stuff there.
There was a Genesis in '67, you know. There was a Genesis in '72, there's a Genesis in '76. But, you know, you and I, you don't read the same kind of books that you used to read when you were, you know, 15 years ago. You don't dress the same way, you don't listen to the same kind of music, and nor do we. And so we are changing as everybody else is changing.
Oh, I know you're going, but I can't believe it's the way that you're leaving. It's like we never knew each other at all. It may be my fault.
I think we've always been like it's this old combination thing. People find it hard to understand. And it's the combination of the different talents that you put them together and you come out with this strange element that is, it's like cooking, actually. That's like Genesis, and no one can control it. And people seem to say, you know, what's the next album? What are you planning? And it's not like that. We just go in and we start banging around and things come out, and we can't control it. This monster out of control.
There's so much you promised. How could I ever fall?